Welcome to the Souls of the Horizon and J-Cat Adventures. Dive into thrilling escapades, luxurious settings, and captivating tales through ebooks and print editions. Crafted for suspense, adventure, and timeless drama, these stories will awaken your spirit for excitement. Join a global fan community, subscribe now, and click the link to donate to support more stories you love. Note: this series contains mature themes, including romantic and erotic content, and may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
Jane. The Winding Path. The horizon burned amber and gold as Jane stood on the cliff's edge, her fingers clenched tightly around the journal she carried everywhere. It was battered now, its edges worn, and its spine held together by tape and hope. Inside it were the fragments of her life, words scrawled in hurried desperation, sketches of moments too fleeting for her camera, and letters she'd never sent. She thought she'd left her old life behind when she crossed into this small coastal town, but the past has a way of echoing in the most unexpected places. Jane's story began in the small, forgettable town of Elmswood, where dreams were traded for routine and ambition was suffocated by the gray weight of expectation. Her father, a mechanic, once told her that her wanderlust was a passing phase. Her mother, a quiet woman with a love for gardening, simply smiled in that knowing way, as if she could see the long road ahead for her daughter even before Jane could. But Jane had known since she was a child that Elmswood was only the beginning. At 16, she climbed to the top of an abandoned water tower just outside of town. It was a warm summer night, the air alive with the hum of cicadas. Below her, the fields stretched endlessly, kissed by moonlight, and for the first time, she felt it, a pull toward something greater, something unseen. One day, she whispered to the stars above, "I'll go as far as this horizon takes me." Her first step into the unknown came when she packed a duffel bag and boarded a bus headed west, toward the shimmering promise of the ocean. Jane didn't have a plan, just a restless spirit and the kind of reckless courage that only youth could provide. That journey took her to bustling cities where she lived among strangers who became family, to small towns where she lingered just long enough to leave her mark, and to wild landscapes that reminded her how small she was in the grand design of it all. But the horizon is not always kind. It was in a rainy little town on the outskirts of Portland where Jane met Claire. Claire was like lightning, bright, electric, and impossible to ignore. They spent 3 years together, building a life filled with art and music and stolen moments of joy. Jane thought she'd found her forever, but Claire's ambitions pulled her elsewhere. One gray morning, as rain dripped from the windowsill, Claire left. No big fight, no tearful goodbye, just a letter on the kitchen table and the hollow sound of the door closing behind her. It broke something in Jane. For months, she wandered aimlessly, carrying the weight of her heartbreak like a stone in her chest. She worked odd jobs, bartending, cleaning, even teaching English in a small town in Peru, but no matter where she went, the ache followed. It wasn't until she found herself standing in front of a towering mountain range in the Andes that she realized what she needed wasn't a place or a person. It was herself. And so, Jane began to write. Her journal became her lifeline, a place to pour her pain and her hope, her failures and her triumphs. She wrote about the people she met, the widowed artist in Spain who painted sunsets to remember his wife, the fisherman in Greece who swore the sea held secrets, and the young boy in Kenya who dreamed of becoming an astronaut. Each story reminded her that pain and joy were universal, that every soul carried its own winding path. Years later, Jane found herself in the small coastal town of Horizon Bay, where the cliffs met the ocean in a dramatic embrace. It was here she decided to stay, not because the ache had disappeared, but because she had learned to carry it with grace. She opened a small bookshop called The Winding Path, where travelers and locals alike would stop by to share their stories. The shop became a haven for those seeking connection, and Jane became the quiet keeper of their tales. One day, an old man walked into the shop. He carried a leather-bound journal and asked if Jane could repair its tattered spine. When she opened it, she found pages filled with stories, tales of love and loss, of triumph and failure. The man explained that he had spent his life traveling, just as she had, and that he wanted his stories to live on. Jane smiled, feeling an unspoken bond with this stranger. As she worked on the journal late that night, she realized something. Her life wasn't defined by the horizon she had once chased so desperately. It was defined by the moments between, the people she'd met, the lessons she'd learned, and the stories she'd gathered. And as the sun rose over Horizon Bay, painting the sky with hues of amber and gold, Jane stood at the edge of the cliff once more. This time, she wasn't searching for what lay beyond the horizon. She was simply standing still, grateful for the winding path that had led her here. Months after the old man left his journal in Jane's care, her small bookshop had become a quiet beacon for wanderers and storytellers alike. Each shelf in the winding path was filled with books that carried the weight of the world, not in their pages, but in the hands of those who shared their lives while buying or borrowing them. Jane had always been a collector of stories, but now, she realized she had become their steward. The journal the old man had left behind lingered in her thoughts. She had meticulously repaired it, restoring its tattered spine and ensuring its delicate pages would survive a little longer. But as she read its stories, narratives of love lost, daring escapes, and quiet moments of triumph, she felt a spark of longing she hadn't experienced in years. The stories were fragments of lives lived boldly, unafraid of the unknown. For the first time since settling in Horizon Bay, Jane began to question whether her story had paused too soon. One evening, just as the sun melted into the ocean, casting the shop in hues of amber, a young woman entered. She had short, windswept hair and carried a backpack that looked as though it had seen 100 lifetimes. Her name was Eliza. She said she'd been traveling the world for years, much like Jane had, but something in her voice carried a shadow of doubt. Eliza's story tumbled out over the course of an evening spent in the shop. She had left home to chase the horizon, but somewhere along the way, she'd lost her sense of direction. Her travels had become a series of disconnected moments, and now, standing on the edge of 30, she wasn't sure what she was searching for anymore. Jane listened, her heart aching with familiarity. That night, after Eliza had gone, Jane opened the old man's journal again. It occurred to her that perhaps it wasn't just a collection of stories. It was a map, not to a physical destination, but to a deeper understanding of the paths we walk and the reasons we choose to walk them. As she turned the pages, an idea began to form. Perhaps her role wasn't just to gather stories but to share them in a way that could guide others. The next morning, Jane placed a sign in the shop window, "Story Circle tonight. Share your journey." She didn't know if anyone would come, but something deep within her told her it was the right thing to do. As the evening sun dipped below the cliffs, a handful of people gathered in the cozy warmth of the bookshop. Eliza returned, bringing with her a travel-worn notebook filled with her fragmented thoughts. An elderly couple, longtime residents of Horizon Bay, came to share the story of their 50 years together. A teenage boy, quiet and reserved, brought a poem he had written about the waves that crashed against the rocks below the cliffs. Jane sat among them, listening as their stories wove together like threads in a tapestry. Each voice added depth and color, and for the first time, she felt the true weight of the role she had chosen, not just as a collector but as a storyteller herself. By the end of the evening, the group had decided to meet regularly, each gathering becoming a shared exploration of life's winding paths. When Jane returned home that night, she stared at her journal, untouched for weeks. Slowly, she opened it and began to write, not about her past but about the new chapter she had unwittingly begun. The story circle grew quickly. Word spread through Horizon Bay, and soon the little shop was brimming with voices. Travelers passing through town heard of it and stopped by to share their tales. Jane marveled at how the stories seemed to build on each other, each one a puzzle piece revealing a greater truth about the human experience. Yet, amid the inspiration she found in others, Jane couldn't shake the feeling that her own story was incomplete. One afternoon, as Jane was rearranging books, she found an old map tucked between two dusty novels. It wasn't a traditional map but a collage of hand-drawn symbols, cryptic notes, and the outline of a coastline that vaguely resembled Horizon Bay. At the bottom, written in an elegant scrawl, was a single phrase, "The journey is the destination." Intrigued, Jane asked around town but found no one who could tell her anything about the map. She placed it on the counter in the shop, hoping a passerby might recognize it. Weeks passed, and though it drew curiosity, no answers emerged. Then one evening, as the story circle was winding down, Eliza noticed the map. Her eyes lit up as she traced her fingers over its surface. "I've seen something like this before," she said. She told Jane about a similar map she'd found years ago in a remote village in Ireland where the locals believed it marked the resting place of stories yet untold, a mythical idea that the greatest stories weren't written down but lived. For Jane, it felt like a call to action. The next morning, she packed a small bag, leaving the shop in the capable hands of her assistant, Margot. For the first time in years, she set out beyond the familiar bounds of Horizon Bay. Eliza decided to join her, eager to rediscover her own sense of purpose. The journey took them across rugged landscapes and into forgotten corners of the world. The map led them to abandoned libraries, hidden groves, and ancient ruins. At each stop, they encountered people who shared their stories, some joyous, others heartbreaking. Jane realized the map wasn't guiding them to a single destination. It was showing them the threads that connected all souls, weaving a tapestry of human experience. It was in a remote seaside cave that Jane finally understood. The cave walls were covered in carvings, each one a symbol of a story told over generations. In the center of the cave was an altar, and upon it lay an unmarked journal, its pages blank. Jane hesitated before picking it up, her fingers brushing its leather cover. It felt like an invitation, a challenge to add her own story to the countless others. As she stood there, Eliza spoke softly. "Maybe this is the point. Not to reach the end of the path, but to embrace every step of it." Jane smiled, tears welling in her eyes. She opened the journal and began to write, her words flowing freely, unburdened by the fear of what others might think. She wrote about the horizon she'd chased, the love she'd lost, and the new beginning she'd found in Horizon Bay. And as she wrote, she felt something she hadn't in years, a deep, unshakable peace. When Jane and Eliza returned to Horizon Bay, they brought the journal with them, placing it on a pedestal in the bookshop. It became a living artifact, a testament to the power of stories and the journeys that shaped them. Visitors were encouraged to add their own pages, and soon, the journal overflowed with the collective voice of countless souls. Jane no longer feared the horizon. She had learned that the winding path wasn't something to conquer but to cherish. And in that realization, she found her place, not as a seeker of destinations but as a guide for those still searching. And that's a wrap on another thrilling episode. From heart-pounding action to emotional connections, Jay Bahari will never fails to excite. Don't miss the next adventure. Subscribe now for more suspense, romance, fantasy, and mystery. Want to dive deeper? Grab an ebook on Etsy or a paperback on Amazon to keep the excitement going. You can also catch the podcast on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, or Amazon Music. If you're hooked on the Souls of the Horizon and J-Cat Adventures, show your support today. Click the link to donate and help us continue creating the stories you love. Until next time, stay adventurous. There's no mystery is too big to solve.
Disclaimer and notes. The Adventures of the Souls of the Horizon and J-Cat Adventures is a work of fiction. The characters, events, and settings depicted in this series are the products of the author's imagination and are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to real persons, living or dead, or actual events is purely coincidental. This series contains mature themes, including but not limited to romantic and erotic content, that may not be suitable for all audiences. Reader discretion is advised. The depictions of relationships, encounters, and situations are intended for entertainment purposes only and do not reflect real-life practices or endorse any specific behaviors. The portrayal of characters, including their actions and interactions, is intended to be a dramatic and fictional narrative. The series is not intended to promote or condone any form of violence, exploitation, or abuse. The characters of the Souls of the Horizon and J-Cat Adventures, while depicted as a hero in fictional scenarios, is a creation meant to entertain and should not be considered a role model for real-life behavior. Readers are reminded that this is a work of fiction and should enjoy it as such. Any interpretations or applications of the content within real-world contexts are the responsibility of the reader. The author and publishers disclaim any liability for actions taken by readers based on fictional portrayals and scenarios in the series. Notes: Jay Bahari, The imaginative mind behind The Souls of the Horizon and the Adventures of J. Cat has a unique talent for weaving tales of mystery, romance, fantasy and adventure. With a flair for creating captivating characters and intricate plots, J. Bahari's storytelling is enriched by a deep understanding of human nature and a keen eye for detail, crafting narratives that resonate with both excitement and emotional depth. Each episode of The Souls of the Horizon and J. Cat's Adventures is a testament to Bahari's ability to blend intrigue with passion, creating a world where the extraordinary becomes reality. In this creative journey, J. Bahari has harnessed the power of artificial intelligence to enhance the storytelling process. With the help of AI input, Bahari has been able to explore new dimensions of creativity, pushing the boundaries of conventional storytelling to deliver an experience that is both innovative and compelling. Together, J. Bahari and AI have crafted a series that not only entertains but also captivates the imagination, inviting readers into a world where seduction and suspense intertwine in the most alluring ways. This collaboration stands as a testament to the endless possibilities that arise when human creativity meets cutting-edge technology, forging a path to stories that are as mesmerizing as they are unforgettable.